Craig Bohl, the Executive Director of the American Football Coaches Association, with me, David Smoke on 365 Sports. I don't even know sometimes where to start. And I'm sure you've got can you imagine juggling any more either unknowns, uncertainties, or changes as you are right now?
You know what? No, not at all. And I feel for some of my colleagues that are out there. Coaches are about rolling up their sleeves and, having a plan and working the plan. And when the goalpost keeps on changing, it has been challenging to say the least. I am confident, though, if we can get the right stakeholders at the table, we can come out on the other side. And I'm not going to say it's the same old way we had it before, but I think we can come out in a better place. But what is going to be important is for our coaches to have a voice at the table.
When you say the right stakeholders, who is that?
Well, I think there needs to be a composition of not only some conference commissioners, some athletic directors, certainly student athletes. But, when this whole agenda got rolled out with NIL and transfer at the time, our presence within the NCAA, I was on the committee at the time, but our voices were not heard. We tried to make a point of maybe some unintended consequences, and those consequences are what we're living in now. And so when I say stakeholders, I do believe a group of head football coaches need to have a presence when we come up and make some better decisions moving forward.
I spoke or traded text messages, Craig, with Jim Grobe, Phil Bennett, and Mac Brown.
Oh, boy, some old friends right there.
Yeah, and just to kind of get their perspective, and then some other coaches too. But what is the number one what would at least stabilize or calm things down? Would it be whatever this house settlement's going to be? Would it be a salary cap? Would it be revenue? What is the one thing that has to happen?
Well, here's what I am going to let everybody know. The AFCA has taken a position. We've been up to the United States Capitol on 3 different occasions, and the first thing that we're championing is to get these representatives that are called agents that are representing these current student athletes or high school athletes to have some guardrails, to have them be regulated, to certified, because right now anybody can say that they're an agent. And so what is occurring is some exploitation of some of these younger athletes, and some of the things that have been done are truly tragic. We believe they certainly need representation. They just need to have some accurate representation, and then we need some more transparency. So that's the very first thing. And whether that is, nothing's going to change that need, whether the House settlement comes in, however that comes out. They need representation now. They're going to need representation in the future. We're just saying these agents, we need credible agents. And right now we have a host of guys who really are doing some things that are unethical, and that's being kind.
It seemed like anytime the NCAA tries to do something, they're sued. And that's kind of how all this started, because forever and ever, they were able to pretty much do what they wanted. And there was, it was like the IRS. You didn't mess with them.
Right.
What does a salary cap do if, in fact, that was to be installed? And is that something you're for or against?
Well, there's so many things that I'm going to be guarded as far as making grandiose statements, since I'm representing the AFCA. I do know that there's a number of coaches out there who are for that, would like to see some semblance of stability and some semblance of the known, and then maybe more competitive equity.
So you coached at North Dakota State. You obviously had success there, a great amount of success, and then Wyoming. So you have been on the side that seemed like right now that they're almost drowning, trying to keep up, or what decisions they're going to make. Do the larger schools want to just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So a salary cap to them doesn't mean anything. Is there enough of caring about the game itself?
Well, I'm certainly concerned about that. We understand the popularity of college football right now and the great scope of college football. And coaches that are working in some of these more high-profile schools are certainly they want to make sure that there's equity. I do think that there's always going to be a place for a school like North Dakota State or Wyoming. Now, whether we would have been able to maintain Josh Allen at Wyoming, I don't want to make speculation on that. He certainly was a player that we found and developed, and he graduated from Wyoming. I think you're seeing more of those players migrate to different schools now for different reasons. However, there's always going to be a place for those schools, and I'm in hopes as we fashion a plan forward that there's enough flexibility for those schools to be relevant in college football.
What is the overall feeling, Craig, you get for transfer portal, the window or windows? And do you feel like that can get tightened up and then keep it that way where at least you know that?
Well, as the AFCA, we had a head coaches meeting that was well attended. We had a 4-hour point of discussion on our opinions on how this should get rolled out next year. And we came up with a unanimous decision that we feel like for the betterment of college football, for the student athletes and the programs and where we're at, there's not going to be a perfect landing spot, but our coaches came together and compromised, and there was meaningful discussion for 4 straight hours on one topic. The meeting was heavily produced. It was there were electronic votes that were casted. There was also a voice vote at the end. And as a group with the AFCA, we proposed one window starting January 2nd. That would be a window for notification. Doesn't mean that they have to decide at the end of that, but it's just a window for notification from the 2nd to the 12th of January. What became apparent was there was no appetite to have a window that occurred during the playing season, i.e. the postseason. However, we could not find a date that would be comfortable for everything. Obviously, if you start on the 2nd, there's still going to be a couple teams still playing. Mm-hmm. And Kirby Smart from Georgia was one of the guys that said, hey, I've lived that, but there's no perfect spot because if we move it back later, if the proposed window moved back later, then there are going to be a lot of schools that had started already that would not even have an opportunity to secure a player who chose to enter the window. And so we knew, one, let's get it out of the playing season. All the unintended consequences with players being tampered with, players being forced to make a decision while their team is still playing. We've seen all those things play out. And so we wanted, by and large, to get the majority of players through that and then have an opportunity for them to enroll in a school. And then coaches felt like it was imperative for their players to be able to have an 8-week strength and conditioning progression before they even started to entertain ideas of spring ball activities. We did look at a later starting date, and there was some cumbersome problems there. We also had to recognize, as college football, we don't control an academic calendar. And so this was the best date that we came to. We don't feel like the 2 window models is beneficial for anybody, which is why we're proposing one window.
Is there a concern, no matter what you want, whatever the coaches feel like is good for the game, and that's another story about whether everyone wants the best, what's best for college football, is that because of the Pavia ruling at Vanderbilt or others, that there's that you could say you can only transfer twice, or you can only. How do you? That just seems to be so wide open.
Well, it certainly is, and the AFCA's had an ongoing dialogue with the attorney generals who brought suit against the NCAA. We've had offline conversations with them, finding their logic on that. I think as things stand right now, we have to recognize that the student athletes have the ability to transfer multiple times during the course of their career. What is concerning, though, is when you hear certain players actually trying to transfer twice within 1 year, a competitive year. And so there's some things that we've got to get our arms wrapped around. I do know, those members of Congress have reached out to the AFCA, both in the House and the Senate, and also from the Republican side and the Democratic side. They want to hear what the coaches have to say. And like I said before, we don't deserve a seat at the head of the table, but we're the practitioners, we're the boots on the ground, and they want to hear what our opinion is.
What do you hear about tampering? And is it as prevalent and just wide open as what we seem to hear?
Well, the term that is getting bantered all around the country is the Wild West. Between Texas and Wyoming, I live the Wild West, and that's exactly where we're at in the tampering. It's an onslaught. And it is frustrating because of, once again, as coaches, we're proposing to get some of these agents that are certified and regulated, get them. And the NCAA does not have subpoena power. This proposal would be a federal law. If it is found that somebody is tampering, there's going to be subpoena power and there's going to be penalties. Right now, we don't have that, and we have the true Wild West.
And you hear coaches say that, but it seems like, do we trust that not everybody themselves is tampering?
Rephrase that again, because I want to make sure I'm speaking correctly.
For example, you hear about coaches who say that their players are being tampered with, no matter what level.
Right.
But are you concerned that you don't hear anyone say, and I'm not using the term, Coach X at University X is tampering because of blowback that they themselves might be doing the same thing somewhere else?
Well, I'm going to be guarded about that simply because that's a broad-based statement.
Okay.
There's allegations that are always being made. Coaches are competitive. I do think, we need to make sure that we're operating in an ethical realm. But what is so cumbersome is this enterprise now has gotten so large that, maybe people representing the school in a third-party way might be proposing or acting like this is what the coaches are saying.
Craig, if you had a team, again, you did, and as
Right.
successful as you were, and the transfer portal is what it is, how do you determine really playing time for somebody that might be second on the depth chart, but pretty good, but you have to not appease them. You have to do what's best for your team. How do you balance that to make sure that the player stays happy?
Well, I'm out of the saddle. I have dealt with a lot of my colleagues that are still coaching right now, and I know those topics get brought up. That's hard for me to say simply because I'm not in their chair right now. I did evolve, though. After we had 1 year where there was a lot of players that went into the portal, and Tom Berman, my boss, came over and he was concerned that, I wasn't going to change. And I told him I'll evolve. My stance was to do what was best for the team right now. You had a responsibility to those seniors on the team to win with the best players that they had right now. So I was not going to compromise on potential playing time to appease somebody. And I also know that we're pretty straightforward at Wyoming. If players wanted to be there, we wanted those guys there, and the guys that didn't want to be there, we're going to fit in. Now, does that model work everywhere? I don't think so. But that was a cloth that I was cut from. Those coaches that you just mentioned earlier, whether it was Jim Grove, Phil Bennett, or Mac Brown, they're out of coaching.
Right.
I'm out of coaching now. And I do think the younger coaches right now are doing a better job of adapting. And how that comes about with playing time, I'm not in position to say.
Do coaches and should coaches have the ability to say that's the value of said player? How do you think that works right now?
Well, that's $1 million question. Different programs are out there judging players. There is some conjecture. We're working closely with the NFL. I do know the NFL sometimes will come up with a draftable grade. And some of those metrics have been used to say, okay, this guy's going to be drafted at this slotting in the end of the first round. Therefore, his value is X. I do know there's a whole departments all across the country with general managers that begin to sort out where they see the value of players. And obviously each program is different, how they see a starting left tackle or a wide receiver versus a fullback. And so it's science. And I know a lot of resources have been placed into it. It's almost like a whole pro personnel model.
Greg Bohl with us, the American Football Coaches Association. A couple of more things. When you have revenue sharing, if in fact that ends up being part of what we have with the settlement, can you still have collectives outside of that,
right,
that are a part of college football?
Well, that's the $1 million question right now. First of all, we're all for clarity and a settlement that's coming, and hopefully that's coming here in the near future in April. That's what we've heard. And once those numbers are codified, then there's going to be some clarity moving forward. And what I've been told is the model moving forward for a student athlete to be able to access revenues off of his name, image, and likeness are going to be tethered to an actual value that will be, certified by, I've heard a large firm called Deloitte. So meaning there will be a value if I'm actually doing a TV commercial for a car dealership. What is that like-minded value going to be? And while that may not be an accurate science, you're going to get away from the whole inflated collective, this whole cottage industry that basically went off the rails.
You mentioned Kirby Smart and one of his ideas, and he's been through it because he's been successful.
Right.
Are you concerned, Craig, in any way that two conferences are the ones making all the decisions for all of college football?
Well, that narrative's out there. I sit in a lot of these meetings. I can tell you, I don't believe that's the case.
Okay.
I do know the Big Ten and the SEC is garnering, a larger portion of the TV contracts, and, they're bantering around CFP staging and things of that nature. But I think for the betterment of college football, I've sat in those rooms with the commissioners, and I think that there's much more of an attitude that they want to be more inclusive as opposed to exclusive. So I'm not all for this narrative I'm hearing that just two conferences are going to basically do whatever they want. I don't believe that's the case.
Well, I mean, if you're in the meeting, that's why I asked, because, I mean, you're there sitting there watching it. A couple more things. I know you got to go. House settlement is, I think, April the 7th, whatever that date
That's
might
correct.
be.
Yep.
It's a month from now. What and how or when will the changes take effect if, in fact, it's approved?
Well, I think what you're going to see then is in athletic departments right now this has been coming down the pike for several months here. We thought the settlement was actually going to occur during September, and it got pushed back. I think what you'll see in the short term is athletic departments have already budgeted how they're going to come up with this resources. GMs have already speculated out where their payroll will be. And so you'll see a much more concrete, and there's certainly going to be a lot more transparency, which is what we're all wanting. These backroom deals and numbers that are being floated around, are not necessarily part of competitive equity. And so we're looking for some stability, and we're looking for transparency. And so I think that you'll see that coming in. I'm in hopes sometime. I don't know if it can be accomplished before this next year, since a lot of these contracts are set now. Right. But I think it's going to be done in the near future. Okay,
my last question for you. You are a coach. You obviously had the connection to Tom Osborne, Bob Devaney, Nebraska, and all that. It was as stable a coaching staff over the years as ever. And then they started to get fractured. And then they've struggled since that time for the most part. Matt Rule's trying to get that back together. One of the things that I heard when it came to the transfer portal for players was coaches can leave at any time, and they do, and you left. Is that fair to bring that up or is there loyalty anywhere in college football?
No, there is loyalty, and I chose to stay for 10 years at Wyoming and retire from there. Now I left North Dakota State after we won our third national championship. I had signed an extension that had a buyout with that extension, so I paid that buyout. And coaches, when they leave, either they're negotiating that buyout or they're paying the buyout in full. What we're basically saying then is coaches do have the ability to leave, but they're on the hook for some assets or some dollars. And so I think what everybody's looking at is saying, okay, if a player would in fact leave and he has the ability to do that, well, to negotiate out a contract and how that comes about, there needs to be some financial compensation for that as well. And that's the argument on the other side.
Like the buyout factor for coaches.
Correct. Yeah. And so this adage of coaches coming and going, and this is a shout out to Matt Rule, Coach Rule, pulling for you hard. You got a lot of fans down here in Central Texas. That's my old school.
I know.
And there's greatness there, so just keep on chucking along.
By the way, you may not know this, but in the background, you'll see that Huskers helmet. I was born in Omaha, off at Air Force Base, and so I've been a lifelong fan. So I hope that happens too. And I know what you meant there and what it meant to you, Craig. You've got a plate full. Grant Taft, Todd Berry. Grant started this and did an amazing job. Todd Berry connected Grant Taft to where you are now. There's a lot on your plate. We wish you the very best of luck.
Thanks a lot. Always appreciate being on, guys.
Thank you. Craig Bohl, the Executive Director of the American Football Coaches Association, 365 Sports.